and it was an essay that was commissioned by the grant makers in the arts by a man named Jeff Chang, who actually came out, I think it was 2 years ago, a book called Can't Stop, Won't Stop. It was the history of and development of hip-hop. And I just wanted to share an excerpt of from the some really brief excerpts from the essay, just that kind of got us thinking about this. He paints a really big picture, and then I think from there, just wanting to take a look at the kind of themes that are relative to what we're going to talk about tonight in terms of dance practice that's going on here in the Bay Area. So in this essay, which is entitled On Multiculturalism, you can find this online. If you want the link, you can also contact us and we can send you the link as well. But he writes, multiculturalists had hoped that recognition of race might diminish the historical legacies of racism, but all key social indicators, poverty, education, housing, jobs, AIDS, the list could go on, show that the color lines, gender lines, and sexuality lines have not disappeared. They have only shifted. So we are left with troubling questions. Is it appropriate now to speak of identity with the prefix post? Have we arrived in a post-racial society? Are we in the same struggle with only the names changed? Further, he writes, he talks about an example of some of the triumphs of multiculturalism and how it's paved the way for quote-unquote post-multicultural artists. And he says, quote, "A fixation on cultural diversity has given way to the expressive diversity that was originally the goal of the multiculturalists' call for broadened representations. Nor must post-multiculturalist art, with its disparaging of didacticism, necessarily infer a retreat from the world, particularly given our current turmoil." So those are just two thoughts I wanted to put out there, and I think he really, like this discussion around multiculturalism and post-multiculturalism, I think has really big implications historically and politically. And I think that I'm hoping tonight, if you know the people that I know in this room are any indication that we're really looking forward to not only getting the input of the four featured artists that are here, but also a lot of your input of the thoughts and practice that happens in this room, based upon the people who are in this room. Some of the things that came up, some of the themes that we wanted to be able to take a look at tonight were issues including representation, how one identifies oneself in dance practice, how does this impact or is rooted in one's sense of identity, issues around complexities of the work of dance work that's being created and contexts. One example of Jyoti Singh, who's one of our featured artists, is that her heritage and her calling relative to her very deep committed studies in Ghanaian dance don't line up. Their DNA doesn't line up, and so what does that bring up in terms of either the skepticism or ambivalence that she may face? Yet at the same time, how is it about trying to define yourself relative to the size of society that we're in today? Also issues around homeland source relative to certain traditions and the dynamic and interplay that happens. This is specifically within the context of the work that's happening here in the Bay Area and the fact that there are a lot of traditions that originate and are being practiced elsewhere in the country of origin, but in addition to that, from a diasporic perspective, that it's actually happening in different places and how transmission flows from one place to another. The role of generations, what happens when dealing with transmissions from one generation to another, and how the younger generation interprets and tries to negotiate aspects of expression and of tradition, sometimes even working against certain traditional protocol out of necessity or survival or a hunger for innovation, or in the face of a bicultural life, like those kind of issues. I think the role of intercultural and transcultural work is also something that is connected to experimentation. Especially here in the Bay Area, there's plenty of artists who are trying to work with each other and trying to be able to cross cultures and even supersede them somehow in their process. And we also were wanting to take a look at this this issue of appropriation, which is typically seen in a very negative light, and just really asking the question of what is the realities of appropriation in terms of traditional arts and tradition-based arts. It is very easy and dangerously romantic to kind of line the DNA up sometimes, but I think that does not happen a lot, or what happens a lot in the Bay Area that we find is that those things don't line up, and so what's going on, and what are the levels of how somebody resolves or negotiates these tensions, I think, between the social dynamics that play out, or even within the individual dancer, the individual artist who's dealing with this issue. What are the politics of sampling? Crossing cultural lines is something that's actually really accessible, very easy to do here in the Bay Area. We have such a wealth of resources, and so how do we know whether we're being cultural tourists or when a calling is a calling? Just to take a look at two absolute extremes. So those are just the kind of questions that we're hoping are things that we can begin to air out, and we have today for really great artists to share their work to further kind of ground us in some of the things that are going on here, and will help to stimulate some of our conversations. Thank you.
So let's see, now we're going to just introduce the four artists that are going to both talk to you a little bit about their work and show you some work, and we're going to do it in order. So first is...
Yeah. So the first is Prom Auk. And let me just give a really brief introduction. Prom is an artist, a cultural activist, working in film, video, language, dance, and he has worked with and has studied and is a classical Cambodian dancer, having studied with Sopalin Chim Shapiro down in Long Beach, and who's now based in Phnom Penh. Is that right? And then also with Charya Burt, who some of you may know, who is further up north in Santa Rosa. Yeah. And Pram has studied film at the San Francisco Art Institute, and when he was there, he directed and produced the SFAI Asian Performance Series, creating a space for performers working in Asian and Asian-based forms at a school that's traditionally dedicated to contemporary visual art. And recently has been working on a project called Intercity, which is a 3-year exchange between artists representing 26 cities, 14 countries, and 4 continents, taking place at Meta House in Phnom Penh in Cambodia.
Great, and after Prum, we're going to have Tila Shine Ross, who is... Tila, wave. So who is it fair to say, one half of New Style Motherlode Dance in Oakland? That's Corey Acton over there, right? Yeah. And very energetic and wonderful new kind of hip-hop African-American based, but not only company and school, and I've been there several times. I'm so impressed with what they're doing there. Tila trained at Cal Arts, grew up in the Bay Area, and there we have it.
And we are very honored tonight to be able to have Danongan Kalanduyan, or Danny, if that's easier for you, to be here tonight. Danny is the director of the Palabunian Kulintang Ensemble, and he was the first Filipino to receive the National Heritage Fellowship awarded by the National Endowment for the Arts, and was also, just last year, the recipient of World Arts West's Malanga Cascalord Lifetime Achievement Award. Danny is considered a symbol of Filipino-American identity and pride in the United States, and single-handedly has influenced a lot of the development of Kulintang throughout the United States. So we're really glad that he can join us tonight.
And then last but not least, we have Jyoti Singh. Jyoti, wave or smile. You can't miss her. There she is. So Jyoti grew up doing Bhangra dance, which is an Indian form of dance, folk. And has since found her true calling, as Sherwood is calling it, in Ghanaian dance, which is, of course, a West African form, and has actually apprenticed through the ACTA program with Alsene Suma, So I think it's a very interesting